r/NoSleep. Posted by u/Shadow, Kiwis. I work at a thrift store in the middle of town. Something is definitely wrong with this place. Part 2. I don't even know where to begin the story today. So much has happened recently. Hey, this is Cameron again. Sorry that it's been so long since my last update. I'll explain what happened later. If you haven't seen my first post about this weird thrift store, you can do so right. Trust me, you're going to want to read this first. So I've got some pretty unfortunate news about the shop. My boss called me sometime last week to discuss something with me. Now, something you need to understand about my boss is that he is a very difficult man to get a hold of. He's hardly ever at the store, and worst of all, he never picks up any of my damned calls. So you can probably imagine that when he does call, then it's something very serious. Apparently some sort of incident had happened at the store a few days prior. What exactly this was I couldn't tell you since he wouldn't elaborate any further on the subject, but it sounded suspicious. And now the store needs at least 2 people inside of it at all times during working hours. This was extremely worrying, to say the least. Not only had some mysterious incident occurred, but it was so bad that multiple people now had to be in the store. A long, uncomfortable silence filled the air. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together. Something fucked had just happened at the store that was apparently so bad that my boss wouldn't even tell me about it. It was also extremely annoying. A big part of why I chose this job in the first place was that I wouldn't have to deal with co-workers or supervisors. I mean, sure, there was the odd time when people's shifts overlapped, but it was nothing like this. I contemplated quitting right then and there. But like I said in my previous post, I'm not very well off at the moment and jobs are ridiculously hard to come by right now. Basically, I needed this job. The good news was, since I was now working significantly more hours, I was getting paid a lot more. So hey, that's something, right? Despite this, I was still feeling incredibly uneasy about work the next day. This incident obviously wasn't normal. I mean, how could it have been? I had already dealt with haunted toys, moving mannequins, weird-ass customers, and a plethora of other supernatural and downright crazy bullshit. What were the chances this was just something normal? Like a robbery or something? Anyway, regardless of every red flag imaginable showing itself to me, I still decided to suck it up and go into work the next day. That doesn't mean I wasn't dragging my feet there the entire time. As weird as it sounds, I'm not sure what I was more bothered about. The fact that something horrible had just happened days before, or that I was going to have to work with others now. Yes, I was indeed still salty about that. Nothing much happened as I entered the store. My 2 co-workers were already hard at work doing their thing, and despite us all being around the same age, nobody seemed interested in striking up any form of conversation. But hey, I'll take awkward silence over the deafening quote of the empty store any day. I might not be much of a people person, but even I must admit that having them around did at least make me feel slightly safer. I was working on the checkout in the morning while the others were elsewhere in the store. I usually wouldn't need to be on checkouts very often, but for some reason the store had been slightly busier than normal that day. Not that I'm complaining. Checkout duty is by far my favorite part of the job. It is so much better than sorting through all the crap that comes in donations. You'd be surprised what horrors you can find by just going through these things. So suffice to say, I was quite enjoying myself. That was until someone came crashing violently out of the storage room and started walking towards the counter. I jumped for a second before realizing who it was. It was Jacob, one of my co-workers. He's slightly taller than me and has short, messy red hair. He looked incredibly wound up for some reason. Just a side note, but Jacob isn't actually from around here. Unlike most people who live in this boring dead-end town, Jacob actually grew up in the next one over. I have absolutely no idea why anyone his age would move here just to work in a shitty thrift store, let alone someone like Jacob, but I'm not really one to judge on others' life choices. Before I got a chance to say anything, Jacob started the conversation. "Dude," he said loudly while slamming his hand on the desk. Oh great. I thought to myself. You have to stop it with these pranks, he said. His face had gone red from anger. What? Was all I managed to blurt out before I was interrupted. Okay, I admit it. They were kind of funny at first, but it's been weeks and... This time I was the one to interrupt him. Wait. What the hell are you talking about? I really didn't like where this conversation was going. Since the last post, I had almost completely convinced myself that I was either hallucinating everything or was being pranked. Jacob responded quickly. All this creepy paranormal activity bullshit you keep playing at? The mannequins moving was fun, I admit it, but everything else was just way too much, man. Huh. Well, that answers that. I thought to myself. I guess the good news is that I'm not crazy or being pranked. But the bad news is that I am not crazy and I'm not being pranked. All the crazy bullshit I was noticing here was actually happening. And this new thing. He gestured towards the storage room. Way out of line. I don't know what I did to become the victim of your sick little games, but At this I rubbed my eyes and let out a deep sigh. Look, I hate to break this to you, I had realized mid-sentence that I didn't actually know his name. Jacob. He said in a slightly calmer tone. Right. Jacob. Got some bad news for you, buddy. I tried to explain to Jacob that I wasn't playing some sick joke on him, but he was having absolutely none of it. Eventually I broke and just asked him to show me what he was talking about. At this he seemed to calm down slightly. He agreed to show me what was causing him so much panic and cautiously led me into the storage room. I wasn't quite sure what to expect. He wasn't very specific about what exactly had tipped him off that he needed to show me. He just led me all the way to the back of the room. Let me tell you a little about the storage room. As you enter, you'll see a break area on your right with a chair, some other supplies and a jar of cookies. Oh, just a side note. I don't know why any of you would be in the storage room of my thrift store, but just a word of warning, never eat those cookies. I think they're laced with something. Anyway, sorry about that little tangent. He led me to the back where the emergency exit and store computer are. Once we got there, he gestured towards the computer. On the screen I could make out a small silhouette. Looking closer I realized what exactly it was. It was a little girl. With black messy hair and a white dress seemingly standing in the screen. Daddy? The little girl tilted her head and said in a questioning tone. At this I turned to Jacob with a small grin across my face. Aren't you a little young to have a daughter her age? I questioned in a mocking tone. What the fuck, man? Jacob said in a confused tone. How the hell can you joke at a time like this? Oh come on, I chuckled. I don't know whether this is just you messing with me or not, but that's obviously just a video recording. Dad, she called out again. I know it isn't real, dumbass. He let out a long tired sigh. Look, if you didn't do this, do you have any idea who did? I don't know. Our boss? It could just be some sort of virus. Oh, I guess it could be Carla as well. Carla was our other co-worker. I hadn't talked to her that much, but she might have been able to pull off a child's voice like that. Does Carla seriously seem like the type of person to do this type of shit? Hey, pay attention to me. The little girl on the screen shouted. This shocked me slightly. The audio was a lot louder than I expected. It almost genuinely sounded like a shouting child was standing by my side. We both turned simultaneously to look at the screen. At this the little girl smiled. Oh, that's fucking creepy, I said. The girl giggled. And then she started to walk closer towards the screen. By the way, the reason I was being so dismissive towards this computer girl, as Jacob refers to it, is because there is only so much shit I can mentally handle at this place. Haunted children's toys? Sure, I can handle that. Creepy moving mannequins? I'd rather not, but okay. Hell, I'll even put up with the freaky old people. But a creepy girl inside a computer? Nope. No thank you. Something about this thing in particular was just too creepy. I desperately wanted it to be fake. I needed it to be. But as the girl started to get closer and closer to the screen, my confidence had started to waver. Her full body was no longer visible. Now we could only see her upper torso. This must have been just a recording, right? Jacob obviously clicked on some weird pop-up or put some dodgy donated USB stick into the computer. Right? Well, my question was quickly answered when we heard a loud slam from around the corner. We both turned to look at what had happened, to find that the door to the storage room had just slammed shut. I turned back around to look at the screen to see the little girl inches away from the screen, pressing her fingers up to it. There was something off about her that I hadn't realized until now. If this was a video, how was she making direct eye contact with me? This didn't look like a video anymore. It just looked like something pressing its fingers up against a pane of glass. What the fuck? Jacob barely managed to mutter out before an ear-splitting noise came from the computer. The sound that resonated from it was so hard to explain. Like some sort of glitch effect, if that makes sense. Like the computer crashed and was letting out a loud shriek. And as if something was trying to force its way into a reality it was not welcome in. Then came the smell. The horrible smell of frying electronics started to assault our nostrils. It only took me a few seconds to realize what was happening. The girl had just pushed her fucking fingers through the screen. Jacob, who had been looking at the door up until now, had turned around just in time to see her wrap her small hand around the frame of the monitor. Oh shit! Jacob yelled out. I decided to go for the much manlier reaction of screaming like a child. This seemed to amuse the little girl as she started to giggle again. Though I could barely hear it over the assault already happening on my ears. Jacob instantly spun around to open the emergency exit. He joggled the handle a bit before slamming his shoulder against the door. "It's not opening!" he screamed. We looked back at the computer to see that she had now started to pull herself through the monitor itself, now grabbing the edge of the desk to help herself through. All I managed to squeak out was "other door," before we turned to run towards the door leading back into the store. The lights that hung high above us were now buzzing louder than ever and flickering relentlessly. I prayed that they would hold on just long enough for us to get to the door. If there was one thing I knew for certain I couldn't do, it was navigate this fire hazard of a room in pitch black. It was just a straight line, but we would have to leap over loose objects scattering the floor as well as avoid the plethora of things on the shelves beside us lest we knock something in front of our path. I got about halfway across the room before running into a trash bag full of clothes. I jumped over it with relative ease, but Jacob was not so lucky. I heard a loud crash from behind me, followed quickly by a yell from Jacob. I looked over my shoulder to see Jacob wrestling with the bag tied around his ankle. As ashamed as I am to admit it, I honestly considered leaving him there. The lights were now flickering like crazy and there was already no guarantee that I'd make it to the door before they'd shut off for good. Or worse, before the girl managed to climb out of the screen. Turning back meant losing precious time. Despite these dark thoughts, I couldn't have just left him there. I may not be the biggest people person, but that doesn't mean I'm willing to let my coworker get killed by this thing. Even if I was scared shitless by it. I spun around after a few seconds of contemplation and started running towards Jacob. He had managed to get much more tangled in the bag than I had expected. It was literally wrapped around his legs. I ran up and kicked the bag as hard as I could. It was a pretty good kick, to be honest. I may have even stood there in awe of it if it wasn't for our current situation. I offered Jacob my hand and pulled him off of the floor. We both turned to look behind us to see if anything was coming. The strange noise had now stopped along with the lights flickering. For a few seconds nothing happened. I think a part of our brains was trying to rationalize what we had just seen as some sort of freaky shared hallucination. Until... Found you. The little girl's head whipped around the corner at an alarming speed, wearing the most menacing grin I had ever seen. This fucking thing had crawled out of that computer exorcist style and was now giggling to herself at our shared terror. We both stood up as fast as we could and made a final mad dash to the door, all the while behind us a maddening laughter was getting ever closer. Jacob was now in front of me. Once he got to the door, he swung it open for me to run through before going through himself and slamming it behind him. Thankfully we both made it through. We collapsed up against the door to stop that little hellspawn from opening it. Or maybe it was just to catch my breath. After a few seconds of heavy breathing, Jacob was the first to speak. "Holy shit," he muttered. "Holy fucking shit. That was way too real, man." "You're telling me?" I managed to say between heavy breaths. That was definitely the worst thing I had encountered so far. I couldn't tell if I was breathing so rapidly because I was out of shape or because I was genuinely on the verge of a panic attack. Honestly, it could have been both. We both sat there for a while, inhaling heavy gulps of air. That was until a familiar voice called out from a few feet in front of us. "Ehem." I think we both flinched in that moment, terrified at whatever the store had for us now. That was until we looked up and saw who exactly it was who called to us. It was Carla. Looking down on us from where she stood. "Oh, it's only you, Carla. Thank God," Jacob muttered out. I was also relieved. I'd take Carla over the usual bullshit any day. Even if we had barely spoke since she started working here. "What exactly are you two doing?" she said, annoyed. Jacob was the first to speak up. "Ooh." A little girl crawled out of the storage room computer, he said, unsure of his own words. There was a long pause before Carla replied. "Are you serious?" She didn't look very amused, to say the least. "Look. You two do what you want, but I'm not risking my job for you two idiots. Can you move?" "Wait, you're not seriously going to go in there, are you?" Jacob replied with a hint of fear in his voice. "Yes. We need more clothes for the men's section, and since you two are obviously too drugged up to be of any help, I suppose I'll have to do that too." "Wait, we're not high," Jacob blurted out before getting cut off. "Look. Just move. You're lucky the boss isn't here or you'd be in serious trouble. I don't care what you two do, just don't get in my way." We both knew there was no arguing with her. Carla struck me as a very no-nonsense type of person. I doubt she even considered our story about the computer girl to be anything but a drugged-up hallucination. "Fine," I said nonchalantly as I stood up from the door. "Wait, are you serious?" Jacob asked, flabbergasted that I would give in so easily. Let her see for herself, I replied. I didn't want Carla to get hurt or anything, but arguing with her wasn't getting us anywhere. I don't think Jacob approved of my decision. I don't really blame him, honestly. But he eventually decided to take another look inside, on the condition that he was the one to open the door. As weird as that was to me, I still obliged with his demands. He stood up and put his hand on the door handle. Slowly he turned it. As the door opened more and more, it dawned on me just how dark it was in there. When the door finally opened, we couldn't see very far inside. The lights were off. And I don't mean that they had broken or anything. The light switch itself had been flipped. I know for a fact that neither of us touched it on our exit. I don't think Jacob noticed though, and if he did, he didn't show any sign of it. He carefully reached around the wall feeling for the light switch. Eventually he found it. As the lights buzzed back into life, I was bracing myself for the worst. But in fact the complete opposite happened. Everything was completely normal. After a few seconds of thought, Carla spoke up. "See? Nothing there," she said in a half-smug, half-annoyed voice. We were dumbstruck. We even checked the computer and everything was fine. Despite the horrible noise and smell that had come from it just a few minutes earlier, it worked perfectly. After that incident, everything seemed to calm down for the day. Though I did avoid going back into the storage room at all costs. Even if that girl was gone, I still felt an unbearable looming dread being in there. It's definitely the most uncomfortable place in the store. It has no windows and it is so claustrophobic. Not to mention the constant feeling of unease. Like I'm being watched or something. In the comments of my last post, someone recommended that I splash some holy water in the store. I think if I do go through with that, then I'm going to start there. Anyway, once we were done for the day, we locked up and all went our separate ways. Or at least that's what I expected to happen. In reality, I got halfway down the street before hearing footsteps rapidly approaching from behind. Hey man, wait up. It was Jacob. What could he possibly want with me? I thought to myself. Nevertheless, I did slow down to let him catch up with me. Oh man, you walk fast, he said while catching his breath. What's up? I asked him. I wanted to talk to you, he replied through heavy breaths. What about? I replied, overly cautious. Despite only really knowing Jacob for a day, I was still worried about what he wanted to talk about. Had I upset him somehow? I really should have seen his response coming. The store, dude, he said like it was obvious. Which I guess it was in retrospect. Of course he wanted to talk about the store. He had just realized that day that all the weird and crazy stuff wasn't just some silly joke someone was playing on him. Though I must say I'm very surprised he waited until then to bring it up. Maybe he had the same bad feeling about the store as me. So, all that crazy shit, he trailed off, is real? Yeah, pretty much, I responded. Fuck. Do you know what causes it? Like, are the things in the store possessed or something? That wasn't a bad theory. I'm ashamed to say I hadn't thought of it sooner. Thrift stores are full of things that used to belong to the recently deceased after all. It's not completely out of the question that some of those items would have brought the spirits with them, if they held enough significance at least. I think that's how ghosts work anyway. But as good as that theory is, I still feel like we're missing something. Maybe? I replied hesitantly. That would explain the mannequins moving, I think. And the screen girl, Jacob added. Yeah, that too. Do you think we should call a priest or something? Jacob questioned. That's not a bad idea. But do we actually have the authority to call anyone to the store? I feel like the boss will get pretty angry if we asked a priest to come without his permission. Yeah, you're probably right. Jacob replied, annoyed. That does sound like something that could affect the business after all. He added. It wasn't a bad idea. In fact, I would have been all for it. But like I've said before, I needed this job. I couldn't risk losing it for something like this. Though I did make a mental note that if things got any more dangerous, that it's something we should try. Suddenly an eerie silence filled the air. I got the impression that Jacob wanted to say something but was putting it off. Hey Cameron. He stuttered out hesitantly. What do you think would have happened if that girl caught us? I paused for a while, contemplating what to say. I hate to admit it, but I was dreading this question. I was actively trying to avoid thinking about it. I didn't want to know what that thing had in store for us. And thinking about it just made everything so much worse. I don't know, was all I could manage to struggle out. We both walked in silence for a while before choosing a different topic to talk about. Apparently Jacob lived in the same general direction from the store to me, so that's pretty nice. We talked for a while more before we turned to go our separate ways. Oh yeah, "Thanks for coming back to help me, Cam, I appreciate it," Jacob said. "It's fine, I couldn't just leave you there," I replied. Getting to sleep that night was hard. Every time I closed my eyes all I could see was that stupid girl. Her dark black eyes staring at me through her equally dark tangled hair. But despite that, I surprisingly still managed to get some sleep that night, even if it was only a few hours. The next day was strange in a number of ways. First of all, when I walked into the store expecting to be met with the same silent ominous feeling I had slowly grown accustomed to, I was instead greeted by a voice. "Hey Cameron, how's it going?" asked Jacob cheerfully. He was sitting at the front counter with his feet up on the table, sorting through a box of books that had come in a few days before. I don't know what surprised me more honestly. The fact that Jacob was still here after our unfortunate encounter with the screen girl, or that he seemed genuinely happy to see me despite only talking for the first time the day before. I know it sounds kinda sad, but I can't really remember the last time someone was happy to see me. Either way, Jacob was taking the news that his workplace is horribly haunted much better than I was expecting. The other strange thing was the smell. "Oh Jesus Christ," I said, backing towards the door frame. A sickly metallic smell filled the store. It was so potent that smelling it at first made my head go dark. Instinctively I took a step back and covered my nose with my sleeve, though this did little to mask the horrid scent. "What is that?" I asked while tears were welling up in my eyes. "Oh, that? I'm not sure. I think there's something wrong with the air vents," Jacob replied calmly. "Fuck," I said, aggravated. This day was already going to be hard enough without the sickening smell assaulting my nose the entire time. "Do you think I should call the boss and ask him to fix it?" To my surprise, Carla jumped into the conversation. "We've already tried that. He just isn't picking up," she said as she sorted another box of books on the floor next to the large shelf on the wall facing the counter. "Oh. Weird," I said in a nonchalant tone. "Pretty piss-poor management if you ask me," Carla continued. "I mean, what would happen if there was an emergency?" I couldn't help but agree. I had barely seen our boss around since starting here, and by the sounds of things neither have the two of them. Personally, I didn't really care that much. As long as the paychecks kept coming, I wasn't really bothered. But I've gotta admit, if I was running this place, I wouldn't let a bunch of teenagers fresh out of school work here unsupervised. Despite the horrible stench, the three of us decided to just start work as normal. It's not like we could really do anything. None of us knew how to open the air vents, let alone get up to them. They were all the type high on the ceiling, and we didn't have a ladder around. Plus, without the proper equipment we wouldn't be able to do anything about it anyway. Sorry, I'm rambling. I just don't feel ready to recount this next part yet. Despite it only being a few days since we all started working together, me and my coworkers have gotten a sort of routine going. I'd usually work the checkouts unless it's a slow day, which is almost every day, but it's fine since I could usually help one of the others with one of their tasks instead. Carla would usually sort through any donations that come in and throw away anything too damaged, dirty or dangerous to be sold. I just hope she's better at it than I am. And finally there is Jacob. He usually goes around the store and finds places where we could put more items. He also checks the dates on things. Oh right, I should probably explain the date system. Basically, if an item isn't sold by its third week on display, only then can we throw it out to make room for another item. It's a weird system, but it works. The weird thing is that despite the shop not getting many customers, we seem to get an unusually high amount of donations. We get multiple a day, and they're usually brought in big bags or boxes, or even just left out on the back doorstep. So you can probably imagine how packed the storage room is. Sorry. I'm rambling again. So something happened yesterday. It was around 2 p.m. and Jacob was in the room to the right of me. He had been in there for a while, taking his time checking all the dates of the products and removing the older ones. That was until he finally finished. He was walking back into my room with the box in his hands. Then something weird happened. He stopped dead in his tracks and started staring right at me. Honestly, I was worried that he had just been possessed or something and was about to dive over the counter to attack me. Honestly, I think I would have preferred that to what had actually happened. Do you know her? What are you talking about? I said, slightly annoyed. I looked around the store puzzled before turning back to Jacob to respond. There's literally nobody in here. Now I was getting annoyed. I would have thought he was messing with me if it wasn't for the shock on his face. Slowly he nodded his head towards me as a response to my question. It took me far longer than I would like to admit here to understand what Jacob meant. You see, there's this big store window right behind the counter. He wasn't gesturing towards me. Hell, he wasn't even looking at me. He was looking through the window behind me. When I had this realization, my blood ran cold. What the hell was he talking about? At that moment I didn't even want to look behind me. Every fiber of my being was screaming at me to jump over the counter and make some distance between me and whatever this was. But against my better judgment I slowly turned around and came face to face with Gertrude. Let me tell you a little about Gertrude. She's another one of our store regulars. I don't want to make any assumptions, but I think she might have some sort of mental issue. I'm not entirely sure, but she definitely gives off some weird feelings. She's an older woman, so I understand that she may not be all there, so despite her creepy behavior I've always tried to treat her with as much kindness and patience as I would my own grandparents. But it hasn't always been easy. Once she came into the store while I was busy in the storage room and hid around the corner for at least 30 minutes back against the wall until I walked in and found her. Another time I found her sitting on a stool in the changing room just staring into the mirror on the wall. It doesn't even feel like she's not all there when she does these things. She seems so, I don't know, lucid, when I find her doing these things. I want to be nice and non-judgmental towards her, but I just can't shake the feeling that she simply enjoys scaring people. I thought it'd be easier with my new co-workers around, and in a way it was. But I didn't feel any less vulnerable. If she is doing these things on purpose, then she's putting a lot of effort in just to scare some random thrift store worker. Once I turned around, our faces were mere inches away from each other. Her face was pushed almost into the glass, but weirdly enough I don't remember there being any fog on it from her breath. I let out a scream and jumped back, almost knocking over the stack of what I could only assume were burned or knockoff DVDs that were displayed neatly on the counter. I would have probably cracked my head on the hardwood if I hadn't caught myself with my arms first. She stood there for a few seconds completely still until finally she started moving towards the door. "Oh shit, Cameron!" Jacob yelled out, watching her make her way to the door. "It's fine, it's just a customer," I replied, trying to reassure him. In all honesty, I was probably way more afraid than he ever was. As the door opened and the bell rang out, Gertrude stepped into the store. "Oh my," she said in a shaky, chipper voice. "Did I scare you, dearie? I'm very sorry." Of course I had the sneaking suspicion that she was anything but. "Haha, it's fine, really," I said, putting on the best fake smile I could. Jacob was still standing exactly where he saw her, frozen in either shock or fear. "What can we do for you today, Gertrude?" I said, getting up from my spot behind the counter and walking beside Jacob. "Well honey, you see, I have this donation I would like to make to the store," she said joyfully. "Ah, that's fantastic. I'll take them off your hands immediately," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. For some reason after I replied she just sort of stood there for a while, staring off into space. Eventually though she did agree to hand me the box. Gertrude gave a kind smile and then walked past us both into the next room. "Creepy," Jacob whispered. "Don't be so evil." The voice came from behind me. It was Carla. "You know, Carla, you seem to have an art in butting into conversation," Jacob said, obviously annoyed. "And you two seem to have an art in acting like crackheads," she retorted. "I mean, she's just a sweet old lady and you two are acting like she's the spawn of Satan or something." As she said this, she pushed past us to accompany Gertrude. I guess I couldn't blame her for this response. For all I know, Gertrude is just a very sweet but also very mentally ill old lady. Nothing that she's ever done has come off as malicious. Maybe this store was just making me overly paranoid towards her. I was awoken from my state of deep thought by Jacob grabbing my shoulder. "So, are we gonna look in the box or not?" I had almost forgotten I was even holding it. I agreed and we took it into the storage room to sort through. It was all pretty harmless stuff, honestly. A few old stuffed animals, a model or two. Nothing really stood out. That was until we got to the bottom of the box. Lying there at the bottom of the large cardboard box was a clown doll. It was entirely made of cloth, not counting its large beady black eyes. It had 2 tufts of orange hair made out of wool sprouting from the sides of its white pale face. It wore an unassuming red smile. For clothes it had a red and yellow polka dot shirt and blue suspenders. It also wore those goofy clown shoes you see everywhere. All in all, it looked like an average doll. Nothing really off about it. Except for its limbs. They seemed slightly longer than they probably should have been. But hey, who am I to judge doll proportions? I'm just some disgruntled thrift store employee after all. It did smell though. I can't really describe the smell other than maybe moldy. But weirdly enough, the doll was completely spotless. Despite my calm tone retelling this story, I was half tempted then and there to burn the little shit in a fire. I don't know what it was about it, Though if I were to guess, it probably had to do with the fact that my workplace was probably fucking haunted, but I didn't want this thing anywhere near me or the shop. Jacob must have seen my immediate disgust of the thing as he decided to wiggle the bastard in my face. I promptly picked up a plush with all those little beads in it and threw it at him. Carla decided to give the doll a wash yesterday to try to get the smell out, and for some reason all the water that touches the damn thing keeps coming out black. She must have tried at least 10 times to get it clean, but to no avail. It was either filthy on the inside or full of black watercolor. You can be sure that when Carla showed it to us, I gave Jacob a dirty look for shoving this obviously filthy toy in my face. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that's everything I have to share today. Oh wait, no, I should probably explain the account change thing. So basically, one of the mannequins pickpocketed me a few days ago when I wasn't looking. The bastard took my phone with all the account details on it. I tried to get it back, but those things have a surprisingly tough grip for being made of plastic and also inanimate. So I've lost access to the original account. Don't worry though, I'm posting here now, obviously. But this also means I need to buy a new phone, so that means instant noodles for dinner for the next few days. I have half the mind to smash the thing to pieces and make it give me my phone back, but I'd rather not get fired for some cheap phone with barely anything on it. If things keep picking up like they are now, then I'm definitely going to have some more stories for you guys soon. I'm looking forward to sharing them. Stay safe, guys. I'll be updating you again soon.